Yo, welcome back. So, Chris put out a video where he's talking to Jonathan about Path of Exile 2, and I thought to myself, why don't we check that out and see what they're all about? Like, what are they going to talk about? Because if anybody, Chris has like a perfect insight to what Path of Exile's direction is supposed to be, or what the original idea was. So I guess they can like. My thought is that he'll go over and ask a bunch of questions on how they change stuff and whatnot, and I'm really intrigued, and I want to see what that's all about. So, massive shout out to Chris, obviously, and to Jonathan as well for putting this out. And yeah, let's just get into it and check it out, man. Without further ado, let's go.
Chris Wilson. So this is the interview that people have been requesting for some time. Today, I'll be chatting with Jonathan Rogers. The context for viewers is Jonathan and I were two of the co-founders of Grinding Gear Games and ran the company together for 17 years or so. I left a few years ago and Jonathan's been running it since then. So for every new Path of Exile 2 release the company does, they run a press tour where journalists and influencers can interview the company about the new expansion. And now that I've got my YouTube channel, I kind of snuck onto the press tour and snagged an interview slot with Jonathan. Hey Jonathan, how are you going?
Hey, I'm going good.
Nice, good to talk to you. Yeah, so how's life at GGG? 050 is looking really cool. I'm very, very pleased to see it.
Well, it's certainly busy, I'll tell you that. Like, there's a lot going on. Like 050 is kind of this just like giant patch that, you know, is like a crazy bear to organize just because there's so many different parts to it. So, yeah, it's certainly probably one of the harder ones I've ever worked on, I'd say.
The scope looks crazy. Like, when you were initially telling me about it, like, obviously there's a ton of stuff in the end game, but you just kept going.
Yeah. I think one of the issues, one of the perils of being in early access is there's this kind of desire of like, okay, with every patch, we want to try and fix everything. Like, we want to try and get the game into a state where it's more releasable. And so then we're like, okay, the end game is a problem. We need to address it. So we're like, okay, what are the things that would need to happen? What are all the things that would need to happen in order to make the end game good? And so suddenly then you're ending up with the scope that's just absolutely gigantic. And probably the smart thing to do would be, okay, we're just going to divide this up into like several pieces, and then we're going to go and we're going to try and do each one, and you know, one at a time. But the problem is, it's really... What was that, sir?
Oh, could you divide the endgame stuff? Like, it feels to me like you kind of do need to do that pretty cohesively.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, it does feel like you can't divide it, and that's because you're like, okay, if we're going to make the endgame good, it means that every single, like, you know, all of the things in it need to be good and so on. But, like, the reality is that probably what it would have been better is, like, hey, just leave one of these leagues bad and, you know, just, like concentrate on the others and everything like that. But I really didn't want to. So what we ended up doing was kind of like, okay, we're gonna make every single thing that's in the end game actually good. We're gonna make sure that they all have the sort of depth of a full like league system. You know, we're not gonna leave it like how it was in 010 and that kind of thing. And that's just kind of led to the scope being huge. And we even like we were planning even 040 to have a bunch of the end game stuff, and then it ended up just getting pushed because it was just kind of too huge. So yeah, it's just a scope management issue, and it's been pretty difficult.
So with regard to that delay there, how did the thought process work? Like, obviously you'd worked out a scope of endgame stuff in your head you thought you could do for 040, and then the reality was you eventually had to decide to push it. But like, what was it that made it too big to do in 040?
Well, once again, I think it was probably just the fact that we wanted to do it all at the same time. So we were like, okay, we need 4 new pinnacle bosses because we need to be, you know, we're upgrading 4 leagues. If we've got 4 new pinnacle bosses, we, you know, like here's all the stuff that needs to do. We need to make sure the league mechanics have like an extra thing going on with each of them, you know, like all that sort of stuff. And I think if we'd just done one of them in 040, that would have been absolutely fine, and we could have got extra, especially because like a bunch of work was done, right? Like there was a bunch of work done before 040 because we did think that the endgame stuff was going to go in. Which then we kind of had to at the last minute be like, okay, we actually can't do this. It's just going to have to be the druid in the league effectively for 040. So yeah, that was kind of a bit annoying because it made 040 feel a lot smaller. And it's interesting because like 030 was obviously a huge, you know, like.
That's funny he says that 04 is smaller, because honestly it felt pretty big in terms of just the overall like theme of the league, the amount of added crafting materials, crafting methods, and the added currencies and all these extra uniques and all these extra things that was happening in 04. I honestly feel like it was pretty big for a league, right? Like not the biggest, but it was pretty decent size. And obviously Abyss is my favorite, right? Like 03 is still my favorite, and I don't think if we take if we minus the fucking basically like inflation apocalypse that happened in 04 with the amount of mirrors that was dropped and stuff like that, right? And prices just rising to absolutely absurd amounts. If we take that part away and just look at the content itself, I feel like it was really successful. The only part that was like an issue or a problem was the amount of drops and like the amount of shit happening in the temple. And besides that, if you played it normally without snaking and stuff, it was actually fairly nice to play it. I think it was really, really good. I think it was actually it was solid, right? Like it was a solid update. That was a bit of an issue with the currency drops and stuff, but besides that part, the content itself was really, really nice. I liked it a lot. I still think to this day that it's the second best league we've had. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Huge release. And then 040 kind of felt like a bit of a letdown by comparison. It really is just because a bunch of work that was done didn't end up shipping in it. So 050 though, on the other hand, is going to feel like this absolutely gigantic release because a bunch of work that was done for 040 that which didn't make it is now going to be in it, plus a bunch of extra stuff as well. So yeah, that's kind of just one of those things, I guess. But yeah, it's sort of surprising as well because the larger something is, it honestly like the time taken to do it seems to go up by more than linearly. Right, like if you do something twice as big, it takes more than twice as long to do it. So that's one of the tricky things we've certainly found.
Yeah, I noticed. So this early access you're running for PoE2 at the moment. It's not the first time GGG did early access. Like as you recall, we did it for 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0 back, like the Awakening and Fall of Oriath and so on. But those were way shorter. Like it was basically like 1 league's worth. And obviously, you guys will have run this for like a year or so. And in fact, is it a year or 2 years?
It'll be 2 years, by the time we're done, I suspect.
Yep. So the question I have here is, this means that you're having to run early access, not just as a beta test, but kind of as a live service. Like you're having to, when you do an update, you can't say, hey guys, please test the campaign. There is no end game, because they want to play the end game. You want them to be playing it as a final product. It makes money and so on. So is it hard managing a live service when what you kind of want is testing of specific features?
It honestly really is. And the funny thing about it is that we never intended, as I'm sure you specifically know, to have early access last this long. Like both of us were very optimistically thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be 6 months. But the reality was it was way.
I actually think it's a good thing they kept it in early access for this long, because that has let us break the game in every aspect of, like every possible way to break it we have done, right? So we've created builds that was absolutely outrageously overpowered and like far beyond anything that should be possible within the game technically, right? So I think that it was a healthy situation to get that under, basically get it under get it into a state that was actually acceptable for the majority of players who aren't playing the game yet because it hasn't gone free, right? I feel like when it goes free to play, that's when the majority of players is gonna come over and actually play it, right? It's the hyper big fans, you know what I mean? Like it's the super sweats and the mega fans that are playing it now in early access, and then a bunch of people who got intrigued by seeing the amount of stuff in the game, who got basically convinced that this was a good investment to pay the $30 to get an early access key. And I think that if they hadn't had it in that early access for this long, I think we would have seen a lot less polished and finished product than what I feel like we're seeing with this new update. The whole new way of interacting with the Atlas is exactly what I kind of was envisioning for the Atlas, that it was something that you traverse and experience, and basically like I really like the idea of having like fixed locations for stuff and going to a certain spot to learn it, not necessarily for my personal playthroughs, but just because of the amount of people I've talked to in public games who are like confused with what do I do next, right? Like what is my next move? What is the thing I should do? What should I grind? What should I... And I feel like this solves a lot of those issues that we had, where I had to sit there and explain to a newer player, like, okay, so you completed all your campaign. Now what you're doing, you're going into maps, you're getting to the end game, and you're gonna focus on doing this mechanic or that mechanic because that is the best this league. So you want to do like this and that, and I feel like this gives a way better opening where you don't have to sit and explain a bunch of stuff. It's so much more just straightforward, and it I know that this is gonna be feeling like it's gonna feel a little bit like holding your hand for those of us who have played thousands of hours of the game already. But I don't mind that because I know that that's gonna alleviate a lot of my time that I spend on helping new players get to the like to the real end game and understanding how to make their own builds and understanding what works, right? Like I really I think this is gonna free up a lot of like a lot of time basically for somebody like me, and I love that. I really adore that.
Way longer than that. Yeah, the funny thing is that I think that when you haven't made a game from scratch for a while, even if you're sitting there churning out league launches, it honestly took me by surprise how much work there is in it. Which I mean, we did it before, but yet it's like somehow you forget like how much there actually is there. I mean, the first time we did it, we took like was it 6 years or something? And like before we actually released anything, and then it was quite a long while after that before we had more than a couple of acts, like all the rest of it and everything. So like that was actually kind of PoE2 just ended up being a sort of similar prospect, but it didn't seem like that because it's like you kind of look at it and you're like, well, the team's so much larger. There's so much more going on. Like we've made all this, there's all this pre-production stuff. We've like made tons of monsters. We've made tons of unique art. We've made all this stuff. It's like it feels like the putting it together part at the end should be somehow not as long as it is, and yet somehow it just ended up being way bigger. So I think that's been kind of pretty brutal wake up call. Is you think you know how to make a game and then you do it again and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. A decade later, it's actually really hard still.
I wonder if this is because some percentage of each release has to go into like league stuff and micros and other novel stuff for that release, and it gives you less than 100% of the time to like it slows down the development of act content and that kind of stuff.
Well, the early access stuff is very much like that, and that in particular is part of the reason why we're not doing a 060. So like 050 is going to be the last release, and the reality is that we're kind of like, okay, getting Act 5 and 6 and all the stuff we've got in 1.0 out, it can't be done in 4 months. We can do it in 8 months, but if we don't do it in 4 months, we have to do another league. And if we do another league, then that's even more content we have to make because it's a league now, right? And so that would actually push 1.0 out even further. And so you've got this thing where it's like every single launch is effectively stealing resources from finishing the game. So at some point we just had to sort of put our foot in the sand and say, no, we're actually going to get this damn game out now if it does mean going a little bit longer between 2 releases. So it'll be really good though, because once we get to 1.0, like not having to have this like extra giant thing going on in the backdrop of finishing the campaign and so on is just going to be so much easier. Like the idea of just being able to make a league rather than have to also like do like mega revamps of everything and like just crazy like new campaign acts and everything is going to be pretty good. I think it's going to like allow us to relax a little bit more compared to what we have been doing, because the rush to 1.0 has been pretty crazy.
One thing that you and I had done previously, like a long time ago, is we'd often be working on the next league, but have the beginnings of a larger league. Like I remember with Ascendancy, for example, when we started work on that. I mean, that's partly because we overscoped or underestimated it, but we essentially moved Ascendancy from its slot to the next slot and did another league instead. Obviously, you guys, like I know GGG won't have plans that far out for the future because you're focusing all on 1.0, but do you expect that you would intermingle larger releases and larger leagues?
So, I mean, look, you need to have updates that like shake up the end game and do other stuff like that every now and then. Otherwise, things will get scale. So we'll absolutely be doing the whole like AB kind of like thing that we used to do. It's just at the moment, effectively, what you've got going on in the background is that the B, as it were, is like the extra act that you're sitting there working on, because there's like a ton of work that's going on there in the background. Like we'll probably do that. I mean, look, it's funnily enough, right? Because sometimes the like latency times get so crazy that there are like things being made for 1.2 already in the pipeline. You know, like it's like we know there's certain bosses that we need and stuff like that, and we're like, okay, sometime around 1.2 we're probably going to need this, so let's get it started into the pipeline now. So there's certainly some longer things like that.
Yeah, that's
Man, can I just say one thing? Jonathan looks extremely worn out. Like he looks tired. Like he's been working 24/7 for the past year and a half. For real. And Chris looks almost like fresh and like a new man after he stopped working there. Like he's like I don't know how to explain it, right? Like, he just looks less worked. Jonathan looks overworked, like for real.
very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's funny because we're like, okay, I mean, as I'm once again, I'm sure you'll probably remember, we're like, okay, the league that's after Christmas is never going to be the big one that has the thing, so therefore the 1.2 therefore has to be the one, and you know, like you pretty much that's how you sort of end up with that stuff.
It's amazing. Like, this may just be like a conspiracy theory I had back when I was trying to work on league planning stuff, but it always felt that the league around September was small because like my blame at the time was like, you know, northern hemisphere people going back to school or whatever, and there was always this dip. Like I remember Delve, one of our best leagues we ever made by far, just having such a big dip. It was like quiet and no one seemed to care at the time, and I thought, well, that's the September curse. And then you've got the January, February, March curse where you've made it over Christmas, as you say. And then you've also got like a new seasonal game coming out every week because there's going to be a Diablo 4 season and a Diablo 3 season and a Diablo 2 season and a Diablo 2 Resurrected season and World of Warcraft Classic and World of Warcraft season of whatever they've got going on and Last Epoch. And how do you like, and then there's the GTA 6 release, right? Which is just a crater where that happens. Like how do you time all of this stuff these days with so much going on?
Well, I have to say, we usually don't pay too much attention to the other RPG releases because we honestly couldn't. And honestly, the community would slay us if they thought that we were delaying things just because some other game had a thing coming out.
Yeah.
That being said, like, GTA 6 is a bit of a problem. Like, if there's a release you're going to avoid, I would say that's the one.
Honestly, I don't think...
thankfully, since they're not on PC...
I don't think that GTA 6 is even going to make it out this year. So I think, honestly, I think that the chances of us getting GTA 6 this year is like 20%, right? And if they put it out this year, this is just, of course, just speculation, right? Let's say GTA 6 doesn't come out before next year. And let's say GGG put out 1.0 around, let's say, end of November, start of December, sometime around that area, right? And then we have to get the game of the year, right? And I honestly think if they don't have to compete with GTA 6, game of the year is nearly 100% secured in the box, right? Because what game is going to beat this game when it comes to full release and it's a free game? Like, I cannot think of another game that's free that provides this amount of this much content, this amount of time you can spend on it, and I don't see it, man. I really hope GTA 6 comes out next year and PoE gets Game of the Year, man. Honestly, I feel like they really, really deserve that.
Then it's like not as big of a thing. But the thing is, they're going to buy out like literally all the media, like all the things will be that, like anything that it's possible to spend money on, I'm sure they'll be spending it on. So probably not a good idea, even just for that reason alone, to launch like on the same weekend as them, I would say.
Well, I mean, GGG always had the David versus Goliath thing going on, right? So why not take on Rockstar?
That's a Goliath I don't want to take on, quite frankly.
But I'm going to be honest, that's one monster you don't want to play around with.
Kind of big. But yeah, I mean, just
unless
generally
it absolutely bombs.
Stuff. I mean, look, I wouldn't launch on someone else's release day intentionally, but if there's other constraints around, I'm certainly not going to shy away from it just because like we've got our own thing going, we've got our own audience, like we can deal with it. It's just been a bit unfortunate recently how often that's occurred, like seemingly randomly. So I don't know if someone else is doing that intentionally or not. But, yeah.
So there are kind of two strategies for scoping release dates and content, right? One of them is we fix a date and then release with the content that's available, which isn't easy if the content has to be a certain size, like a league, for example. You don't want to release with a half-finished league and say, that's what we have. And then, of course, the other approach is, take your time to get it right and release it without a degree of predictability. Once the dust has settled on 1.0 and you're going forward with the plan and resources and so on, which do you expect you'll be doing? Like, how are you going to have a rigid schedule, or?
Well, it's definitely fix the date and have the content move, but there's always has to be a little bit of like sometimes you can't necessarily change the scope easily as you get towards the actual release date, because what you'd have to cut will either be so large that it completely undercuts the release, or there's just like no place you can sort of pick at it to easily pull it apart. So sometimes you do end up with sort of like 1 week delays around that sort of stuff. And this last one we did, so I mean, like, that was even our intention like during PoE 2's early access, and like we've actually improved that a lot recently with like PoE 1's definitely successfully back on that train again, and PoE 2 sort of mostly is. What's been tricky though is just that with an example of the whole thing of having one thing that's too big in scope and therefore you can't sort of do anything but delay is all this endgame stuff, where it's like, because we want to do it in one big package, it's then becomes something where it's like, you don't want to cut one league because then it sort of undercuts the whole message.
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of stuff that's been that's been really difficult in that. But it was like, we certainly strive for just like cut stuff until the deadline works, because people really do actually prefer the regular updates, and you don't want to disappear into a hole and just work on something forever either. Like I think I said it earlier, but like it really is the case that the bigger the thing you're working on is, the more work it takes to make it at all. So I think that like having shorter release cycles and like releasing more often honestly produces more work rather than less. Like you really want to be just producing things on as fast a cadence as possible that you can get away with.
That produces more aggregate entertainment hours as well, I suspect. More releases means more people coming back for more releases and so on.
I guess so, but I wouldn't really think about it that way. Like it really is, I think, in terms of just being able to make content at a reasonable speed. Like it's sort of an interesting phenomenon where that I noticed of the team as well, is like, so we had developers who were working on things to the they were working on PoE 2 for a long time before it was released, and then we had developers who were working on like leaks for PoE 1, and the people who'd been working on PoE 2 for a really long time, like they've gotten out of the habit of like actually like finishing things and getting them, because like it kind of wasn't in a release. And it actually took a little bit of effort to sort of get people back on the train again of like, oh yeah, that's right, we have to actually ship things quickly. Like it actually is quite difficult. And I honestly feel like a lot of the reason why a lot of larger games fail is just because they're not shipping fast enough. Like you can probably make a game better in less time, I actually believe, compared to what you get in a long time. Like there's something really focusing of just like having a deadline that's relatively close by.
So one of the issues that I felt when working on these leagues, like this happened like 35 times and you were sitting right there alongside me every time, was just that things ended up coming in hot every time, right? Like we're still working on stuff. Like there's the story about how I remember vividly sitting next to you at midnight on Synthesis release day and saying, hey, Jonathan, we still have to like check that you're happy with how the tile generation works for Synthesis. And you say, oh yeah, we should do that.
I remember now, yeah.
And you rewrote it with 3 hours to go to a release basically. And
that was a good one. It was much better afterwards. So I was pretty happy with that rewrite.
My responsibility there was making sure we picked the safe option, and the safe option was you rewriting it in 45
Well, the thing is
that
the much worse one that you probably wouldn't appreciate was we rewrote quite a significant portion of the database backend literally the night before shipping 010 for PoE 2. Like,
but it made it happen.
It was the thing is like we realized something about the load testing. We were like, oh, we never tested this thing, and then we changed something about the load testing, and the whole thing just falls over. And we're like, crap, this is like a very big problem. We'll call this stuff tomorrow. And then we came up with some pretty ridiculous ideas on how to improve that. And like someone on our team literally rewrote all the saving. Like they added compression to character saves as like a last ditch thing. Like bear in mind, we're like hours before release, and it's like, okay, look, how about we try this? This is like this is a pretty crazy one. So yes, I'm certainly no stranger to that kind of thing happening.
That's super wild.
Yeah, compression on saves is a good idea because that can take place on the instance, right?
Yep,
and there's a lot of stuff in there, like the waypoint list and so on.
Yeah, made them way smaller.
That's
the particular reason for needing that, by the way, is because once the size of a character gets above a certain size, it becomes larger than what's called a database page. And once it's larger than that, the performance gets really bad. So the PoE 2 characters, as it turned out, were just larger than the PoE 1 ones, and that's part of the reason why it wasn't the performance was just way worse.
So rather than me asking what compression you're getting, the important number here is what percentage of characters didn't fit in a page, and now what percentage do?
Before the test we were doing. In fact, I remember what the test was now. So the thing we did in the test is all the characters that we had were not in late in the game. They were all like, they had a lot of items and stuff like that in the low test we were doing, but they weren't like late in the game where they have way more quest flags. And so the quest flags sent them over the edge, so anyone who gets like past Act 3 or 4 or something was getting above the limit of what could fit in the database page.
Yeah. I can imagine the quest flags, they compress really well, I imagine.
Yeah, they do, exactly.
All zeros or all ones, right?
Yeah, we just added like a really, like, I can't remember what compression it was, but like, you know, it probably half the size of a character, but more importantly, it's below the threshold, and now the performance is good again. So
yeah,
you know,
that's cool. That's cool. So where I was going with me commenting that when I was there, we never had any time to really test stuff is how has that been? Is it still down to the wire with releases? Because I imagine it's hectic. Or have you managed to like has the console simultaneous deployment meant that you've got some breathing room for testing and stuff?
I would say it's getting better, but then on the other hand, it also isn't. Like, it always feels hectic. And ultimately the reason for that is because if there's more time, people want to do more, right? Like, people are always going to be like, okay, like, I can squeeze in a couple more uniques, I can squeeze in this or that, right? So you end up with a situation where people, the work always expands to fill the space that there is.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to actually...
Yeah, I felt my role there was saying no to people in the last 2 weeks, and
yeah, for sure.
Hopefully you're keeping the no's coming.
Well, we try, but then on the other hand, maybe I'm not as good at it as you were.
Well, here's the key thing, being completely honest. When I was fully in charge of scope of something, it would end up smaller, like Sentinel. There was less in there. When you and Mark were involved, there were more yeses and more cool stuff was delivered. Obviously, you know, I was petrified about the risk associated with there's so much extra stuff to test in the last minute, and maybe that led to more problems or something, but the releases where you guys got to decide scope had so much more interesting stuff coming, because that extra 10% on top is where the special stuff is in PoE, and I never had the guts to do it myself.
Well, the tricky thing is that probably the coolest stuff is the stuff that comes in the list.
What a self-observing man. He understands fully what his weak side is and why... Oh, Jesus Christ, hats off, man. This is a man who knows what his strong side and his weak side is.
Latest, because you get to build on top of the things that you already, like, built. You know, like, you've got the actual systems working, and it's like, now let's think of some cool stuff. And one thing I would say about 050 is there's just a lot of the, like, weird, cool things. You know, like, you're like, okay, here's an Ascendancy class, but look, there's a hidden node, and if you do this quest line, then you like commune with the Dreamer, and then like it unlocks this modifies the class like slightly, so it's got this extra node in it, and just stuff like that. There's just lots of things like that.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's like hidden, it's like, here's this hidden passage in this one particular map, and if you walk past it with a specific item, then the rune will glow, and then if you walk up to it, the door opens, and then inside there, there's like a crafting bench, and then on that thing you can like take these things, and you know, there's just the stuff like that, just like lots and lots of these little things.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's been kind of pretty fun having a lot of stuff like that. And honestly, I bet you that there's ones I don't even know about, because Mark will have his deceit features that he'll just sneak in like that I won't know about. Which he does on purpose, by the way. So don't tell Jonathan about this random thing. But it's fine. So like, there's just like lots of little cool things.
I strongly recommend not
announcing
or showing those, of course. You know, the temptation is it's more stuff to put on the live stream. But of course,
we'll show a couple of them, and I'll hint towards a couple of others. But yeah, like there'll be more that they won't have seen. Like there's quite a few.
So on the topic of the 10%, you know, extra stuff that can go on top, one thing you and I tried a long time ago was to release a follow-up patch after a league launch, usually after a bad league launch, with extra stuff. And what we found at the time, at least my recollection of this, is that the players playing appreciated more content. You know, their Reddit comments would be a bit less angry because we've changed some stuff and fixed it, but it didn't bring players back. And so, you know, in terms of changing the shape of the graph or the income being generated during the follow-up patch, the extra 10% after release had little benefit, you know, apart from, you know, good feelings. But I can imagine what you're saying here is by fitting that 10% into the release, everyone gets to benefit from it.
Yeah, well, you certainly want that. No, well, the thing you were saying there about like I mean, okay, so when it comes to seasonal content like this, you really want to just concentrate as much as you can in the season as possible. However, there is a really important thing, which is that you don't want people to feel, the people who are playing, to feel sour about the league, because that will influence the results you get next season. So you do actually need to fix stuff and improve it. But it's really challenging, especially when the things that need fixing are actually nerfs. So, you know, then you've got like sort of the double-edged sword problem. So, like, there was things like, this is actually a PoE 1 example, but it's like, okay, we had some things where there were some mechanics with the Breach prequel that people weren't happy about, and so it was sort of really important to make sure that we'd got those sorted out by the time the next release comes along. Otherwise, it would just be a bunch of people complaining about that. So you do really need to make sure that you're at least improving all that stuff. But in terms of like adding more content, like more uniques or something, it's just not really going to matter because it's like most people are kind of like wanting to go play the season and then then they're done with it and they want to come back next season. So it doesn't end up really mattering too much about adding content. Like it doesn't juice numbers or anything.
Yeah.
And that's like interesting as well because a lot of the wisdom from a lot of other game companies is that like, oh, you need to run a bunch of seasonal events. You need to do like all this sort of stuff. Like it's like a constant refrain that you get. Like if you look at the mobile game space, it's like they're like all about the events. Like it's just constantly like you have to do something every week or whatever to prevent people from leaving. But it's just not our MO at all. Like our goal is like give you a satisfying experience. They leave, you come back later.
Yeah.
And it's honestly the hardest thing to convince people of. And like even a lot of the time people believe they understand it, they still don't really. Like there's that talk that you did at GDC that people commonly reference where we talk about this quite a lot.
Yes.
And the funny thing is that like people will reference that and talk about it and link it to each other and all that sort of stuff. But yet when I talk to these people in person, I still feel like they still don't actually understand. They're still not really willing to commit what they would really need to commit to really do that. Like in particular, most people are incredibly petrified of economic resets. Like people just actually, most games just do not have the balls to actually reset people's progress. And yet I would say that it's like one of the major reasons why Path of Exile 1 still is going today. Like if we did not do that, I just don't think Path of Exile 1 could possibly have lasted as long as it did.
Yeah, I agree.
So, it's a bit of a shock to the system to new players, but once they experience the joy of doing a league start and then the joy of doing another league start where it feels fair, then they're addicted.
It does take a little while to get into because I mean, like you'll start. Of course, people will be, you get the whole thing. Oh, we need to skip the campaign. Like people start to ask, oh, I don't want to have to do it again if I already did it and that kind of stuff. But it's like it's really important that you don't because it's so important that everyone feels like they're on a fair playing field. And it's like part of the reason why you still don't get new users at all. It's like Path of Exile 1 still gets new users today, not like a lot, but we do get them, and so like that's part of the reason why. Path of Exile 1's still good. And, I actually found out a metric recently that I'd never actually looked at specifically, or at least hadn't for a long time, which maybe you'd find interesting as well, which was that between the last two PoE 1 releases, even though they were approximately the same size, only 40% of the makeup of the next League launch was from the previous League launch.
Really? And were those players from past ones, or they weren't?
Yes, they weren't. Right? Most of the players weren't new players, but yet only 40% of the people actually play from one league to the next. So what I'm saying is that a huge amount of people are actually they'll come back like 3 or 4 leagues later and try it again and that kind of stuff. Like there's actually a lot of that going on as well. So you end up with a situation where for a PoE 1 launch you might only get like 10 or 15% truly new players. And then it's like 40% of people who played the last league, and then the rest of them are made of people who played like several leagues ago.
That's fascinating because in the past we had efforts to enlist new players, marketing to new audiences. You had the efforts to return the users from the last one, but there weren't necessarily. We didn't have a strong way of reactivating people from, past leagues. And I wonder, are those users watching the live stream? Like when you announce a new league, does everyone tune in and then they decide if they're playing or not? If they want to make
I have a feeling that is what it is. Like, and that's I think why it's sort of important to have a variety of different leagues with different like feels, because I think there are certain people who will come back with certain things and not others.
Yeah,
and that's just kind of fine.
Totally.
Like it's just sort of nice that you can do a variety like that. And yeah, like I guess you'll have some tentpole releases, right? Like Settlers was like a really huge one that like I think a larger than normal amount of people came back for, which is why it was so large. I mean, there was the whole thing about how PoE 2's release was coming up, and there's like various other tailwinds that were good for it. But
yeah, also to bear in mind with Settlers, sorry to interrupt, but because that was one that you and Mark did, it was the 10% larger than the Chris ones.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just did really well, and like it was just a really good league like that. So I think a greater than usual number of people came back. But,
Still my favorite.
The reason why I was actually looking at this at all is because I was wondering, like I saw the number, what it was for PoE 2, and I was kind of disappointed in it. And I was like, well, I should look at what the number is for PoE, like in terms of like people who come from, I went from 030 to 040. And then I was like, okay, but what is it for PoE 1? And I found the PoE 1 number was actually lower. And I was like, okay, this seems like kind of strange. But as I said, I think it's just because PoE 1's got such a large base of people who, like who come back every few leagues.
Yeah.
That that's the reason why it can be like that.
Yeah, I imagine for a very enfranchised player who knows the game backwards, they really want to play. If the release comes out and they're visiting their grandparents that weekend or something, and they kind of can't play as much as they'd like to, they're like, "Sweet, I know there's another one in 3 or 4 months. I'll play then." And then.
But it's also part of the thing of like running seasonal as opposed to ones where you're constantly running events. Is that like the downside, as it were, is that if you don't get people on that weekend, it's quite unlikely to get them later either. So you're putting all your eggs in one basket there. But I still think it's the superior strategy because there aren't really very many games that have lasted as long as PoE has. Most of the other ones. In fact, like, what is another PvE game that has lasted as long as PoE has? It's like they're actually incredibly rare. There's a few, I think.
World of Warcraft?
Yes, sure.
EVE Online? Does that count as PvE?
That game is such a so far outside my understanding that I don't even know if I can qualify that one way or the other. Like that's like a sort of a completely incomprehensible.
Honestly, Diablo 2 is pretty much the closest thing.
I had a conversation with the EVE developers a long time ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, and I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning this now because it's been so long. But the designers I spoke to had this concern that when they add content to EVE Online, the players expect it to be there forever. And therefore they can't experiment with interesting stuff. And they express direct jealousy with our leagues. We could introduce something crazy, and then worst case scenario is you break the game because it was Harvest, right?
For sure. Well, we do. The funny thing is that we do actually end up bringing most of what we put in back. We just get to tweak it along the way, so it doesn't having to be a millstone around our neck for so long.
Yeah, my rule of thumb was to have the league out, then to take it away for one league cycle.
Yeah, for one league cycle, and then bring it back the one after.
Right, because then when you bring it back, it's okay to come back with changes.
But we don't always necessarily do that. It kind of comes down to a little bit of like what's going on. But I mean, the other thing as well is especially for the PoE2 content we're making, because we're sort of filling out the core, there's definitely expectation, all that stuff to stay around, which probably won't be the case post 1.0. Like after that point, it'll be like the leagues are kind of like temporary more explicitly. Yeah. Then we decide which ones we want to keep or not. But
it's like Rise of the Abyssal in the end game, for example. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So it's pretty cool actually in the new one, because now that we've got everything on the Atlas, there's like giant abyss cracks that are like on the generated Atlas.
Oh, that's cool.
And then you can close those by running maps along the lines. So it actually kind of works out being a similar mechanic to memory lines in PoE1, where you like run along a thing, except it's like a giant continent scale abyss crack, and then you're closing it one map at a time. So that was kind of cool.
I remember when you pitched the look of the Atlas, like having a 3D like landscape that's infinite in all directions, back when we were working on it. And like at the time, I was so busy with other stuff in PoE1 that I didn't really like watch it develop day to day. But then one day I go downstairs and check in with you, and there's this insane 3D rendered infinite Atlas thing, and it's very cool what the team can do. I actually had a question about this. You have to indulge my technical question here, but okay. So in this, correct me if I'm wrong. In the new announcement, you have like an infinite ocean that's part of the Atlas. So does that mean that there's just a portion where one direction is water and the other direction is land? Right. Okay, so my memory is this stuff was being generated procedurally using like overlapping Perl and noise clouds or something like that. Okay.
So when you're generating something that's infinite in size, you need to be able to have a way to generate each block independently of the other blocks. So you need some way of saying, okay, if I can as I said, I can generate this. I don't have to know what was next door in order to be able to generate this. So that you can generate in any arbitrary location. So games like Minecraft and stuff work this way, right? Where you can kind of just say, like, you just for an arbitrary location on the map, okay, here's a place I'm going to generate. So overlapping noise is a really good way to do that. You effectively just take like a bunch of like trigonometry functions like sine and cosine and stuff, multiply them and add values, things like that, and then you get an overlapping one. You end up with like a kind of cloudy looking layer. And then in the case of a game like ours, which has biomes, you can kind of look at it kind of like different heights. Like if you imagine like that there's the mountain, there's like the mountain biome is like a height map, and then you've got like the plains biome as a height map. If you overlay them two on top of each other and you say, okay, wherever the plains are higher, there's going to be plains, and wherever the mountains are higher, it's going to be mountains. You can kind of like effectively imagine how you can get like kind of interesting shapes developing from that. So it's effectively just a bunch of overlapping noises where you pick whatever the highest one is. And so in the case of something like an ocean, where you want to have like, you don't want to have just like a flat border on the edge, but you still want to have it, like blend into it with some interesting shapes. All you have to do is just say, okay, there's like there's a slow blend where we blend in the ocean biome, from 0 to 1 over like a certain distance.
So it interpolates it in.
It effectively interpolates it in. But what that happens is because all the other things have got like various heights, the ocean just becomes more prevalent until the point where it's the only thing that's there. So you get quite like a nice borderline, so long as you can sort of define where the edges in some sort of like fuzzy way like that. And so then you end up with an infinite ocean. But then on top of that, we wanted to have islands in the ocean. So then once you're in the ocean area, there's like a different set of random noises that overlap to create islands. And so I think there's I'm not 100% certain about the exact way, but there's like a thing that creates the island shapes, and I believe it uses the old noise functions for the biomes in order to generate the different shapes of the islands. But then what we do is, like, if it was forest, we instead make it a bunch of palm trees so that it looks like an ocean island. And if it was mountains, it'll instead be, that have like snow and stuff on them. It'll instead be like a thing that looks more like the oceans and the water. So like, there's kind of like a set of alternate art variations, effectively, for the biomes that are on islands in the ocean.
So how do you control the distribution of the islands and making sure they don't collide with each other and stuff?
Well, they can, in which case you just get a big island. Like the island, we're not generating islands, we're just generating a noise function that happens to produce island-looking shapes.
So there's a sea level somewhere.
Yeah, effectively, you look at it as a sea level, yeah. But it's the same as you do the other thing, right? You just take whatever is the maximum value of two overlapping noise functions and tweak the parameters until it sort of looks about right.
Yeah. Okay, so the mechanic doesn't need a discrete island.
No, it doesn't. Right. So basically, the infinite ocean, there's effectively blocks that you explore. So you send out the ships, and then all of the to a given block using a logbook, and then anything that's there will be explored. And then that will include, like, may include islands, may not, but it definitely includes at least maps that are like, so when I say islands, by the way, there are like islands that are like one map pin, which is like just like one map, and then there's larger islands that like have a structure to them that have like different biomes and stuff on them. So there'll always be at least like various maps to do when you do one of these, but yeah, it's just kind of fun to like go from island to island. And we do a few things like the distances between maps on the islands are like relatively small, but the distances on the ocean are quite large. So you get the feeling of traveling like between hopping around between island chains.
That's really cool. Yeah, no, I'm excited. So prior to me leaving GGG, one of the problems that we struggled with was like lack of executive bandwidth, if you see what I mean. There was me and you and Mark. Eric had left a couple of years earlier, and there wasn't enough time to do everything. Like, the PoE Mobile wasn't getting the attention it deserves internally and so on. And I solved this by making the problem way worse by leaving, but left you guys in a bad situation, obviously, with regard to, your time being further stretched. But how has it been going these days? Like, I hear that Mark has found people to, run an internal PoE1 team that he can supervise as opposed to having to work on it himself.
Yeah. So, obviously there's like a lot of things of like company structure, but I would say that one of the things that is like a lot of this sort of company level stuff, you can honestly like not worry too much about it, and like most of it kind of goes away. Like, I don't actually know that, like, okay, so there are probably things that are getting left by the wayside here that probably mean that there's like various intangible benefits that we might have otherwise gotten are kind of being left by the wayside. Like, I'm sure some of the like random deals you're doing and that kind of stuff like sort of probably mattered. But honestly, like, I try to focus as much as I can on just the game development, like, and not really too much on the sort of company running stuff. And like, there are people who like do operations and things like that. We can, that can handle things. But yeah, it's honestly not too bad. So I really try and focus on the game development as much as possible, and anything that's kind of not that, like, that's not directly going to be responsible for making the game better, I try to just make sure that someone else is handling that.
I understand. So in the managing director / CEO position, you have decision-making authority, your responsibility, the direction of the company, but you don't want to be doing like pretend CEO job all day. You just want to make the decision and move back to the game.
For sure. So I mean, like, I basically have like a sort of half-an-hour meeting every morning of like, here's the sort of company things that have come up. And I try to limit everything to that so that I'm not spending all day doing that kind of stuff. Because it would be really easy to just like spend a bunch of time on that stuff. And, it's just the questions. I don't know like how much value like you really get out of that. I mean, there's things that are important, right? Like, we're deciding to do things like ExileCon, and there's a lot that needs to go on there. You need to hire people to work on that, and you need to do all this sorts of stuff. But as I said, I try to really focus on the game for the most part, because that's the part I actually enjoy. And I wouldn't want to, like, basically have my job be not that part too much, because otherwise, then I'd be wanting to leave, I suppose.
Which is understandable.
Being able to do the fun part is, I suppose, the thing that actually keeps someone around and wanting to keep doing it.
This is kind of try to avoid the ultimate threat. Someone brings you paperwork, and you're like, I can do this paperwork for you, but consider before you ask, because if I become unhappy, this all falls over.
But yeah, that's why I just try to stick on the game development. So I'm probably the part that I like the two things that I kind of work on the most, like in terms of the areas, is like the environment side, like making the new acts and areas, and also working on the new character classes. So you know, like I'm doing a lot of that sort of forward-looking work.
Yeah.
Whereas Mark tends to be doing the you know, things like, you know, doing league work. I mean, I still work on the design. Like, I mean, the last league that we made, the temple one, I made the like simulation for that. So I'm still like even occasionally doing some coding.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, like, you know, because Mark usually does things like the monster design and boss design and stuff like that. So he's like often handling the kind of like that moment-to-moment gameplay stuff there.
So tell me about the simulation stuff, because I remember when we did the initial Incursion League, the first temple a long time ago, that started with us, like, I may have just like, you know, made a fake memory here, but we're like cutting up bits of paper and laying out a temple on the carpet on the ground. And like, we've got a board game version, as it were, of Incursion. And then you then coded that into a simple implementation that let us simulate it for the, like, you did a really good betrayal simulator. I remember that was actually like a power horse, that thing.
Actually,
like
can't
it was
remember that one.
A separate C++ implementation of Betrayal that you could run.
Yeah, I sort of vaguely maybe remember about that, but yeah, I mean, but look, doing that kind of stuff, doing the simulators is exactly the kind of stuff that I actually quite enjoy doing. So I did the same thing for Incursion as well, where effectively what I did is I just took one of our tools and just made like a thing where you can open a screen, which is just like, here's the effectively card game version of the temple, and doing that stuff is also good because you can there's a lot of things that you don't really appreciate whether the gameplay is going to be good until you've actually tried it. So there were just a lot of decisions that I thought I knew that I wanted it to work a certain way, and then when I actually tried it in the simulator, I realized immediately that it didn't. So and there was like a lot of things where we sort of eased up on a lot of the rules and like made it easier to connect things and that sort of stuff. And I don't think I would have done that if we had not been having the simulator early. Because a lot of that stuff, you know, like if I was to just put a league like that straight into the game, like a sort of technical league like that, I think you really would, like you'd be in the last few days and realizing, kind of like we did with Synthesis, that we needed to change the generation for it. Like Synthesis is an example of a game of a league where we didn't make a simulator for the sort of mechanics of it, and that meant that like because it all sort of has to come together before you can really play it, you then, you know, realize that okay, we actually have to change quite a lot about this. So I mean, that's the reason why you do it. And really, everyone should do this, and everyone knows this. But then at the same time, it can be tough when you're staring down like a relatively fast league turnaround, and then actually budget time towards something like that. Because, you know, like it's easy to think, okay, we understand what we want this to be. We can just make this and hope that things come together. But yeah, it definitely isn't as good when we do that.
Yeah, I remember for Delve and Prophecy, I made these gigantic Excel spreadsheets where using, I'm losing a lot of geek points here, using Visual Basic for applications, which is what we script Excel with, it would implement the simulator kind of stuff. And every time you hit refresh, it would populate down like it had a list of world areas for a run through the game with how much sulfite you'd collect in each one, how many delves it let you do, given the number of delves on average, how much progress you'd make. And then I'll let you say things like, okay, by maps, I'm at this depth, and therefore we can have it so that the catch-up mechanic went to that depth minus 10% and so on. And yeah, as you're saying, it made it so much easier to have a separate thing to do that, because otherwise, if you're relying on the game version, it's ready, you know, 3 days before release, and have fun balancing that.
Yeah. So you did the gameplay simulation of that thing, and then I think I did the actual generator for the map. For that
Which
one.
is like
actually,
the Atlas one, right?
Yeah, the Atlas one. And that actually, it worked exactly like the Atlas one, actually. And that one came in handy because I ended up using the same thing for the card game at ExileCon, the last one.
Yes.
So, you know, it was kind of handy that I'd written that, because it meant that I could really easily take that and turn into that, which we ended up using.
Yeah. Speaking about ExileCon card games, do not confirm what's happening at this ExileCon, because I understand it has to be a surprise for all of us. And as an attendee rather than a host, I am looking forward to being surprised. But have you had time to do planning of what's happening with that kind of content?
So I do have an idea for what I'm doing with the card game, but I haven't started writing it yet. The card game is kind of one of those things that I sort of do in my spare time at home. So, you know, I'm not going to be sitting there at work doing that. And I haven't had as much time during the 050 cycle for this kind of thing. So after 050, my plan is to go and start, you know, as my little hobby home project, get the card game sorted out. And there's lots of other ExileCon planning going on. And we've got like broadly, like, you know, like we know there's things like the crafting benches and all that sort of stuff, and like the map system and stuff, like, you know, like things like that we need. So there's like space planned out at ExileCon for that, but you know, the exact mechanics of the game in terms of what the League expansion is for it is not something that other people have know about yet.
There's this second layer to the card game design, which is to do with availability of humans to run it, because obviously the staff love engaging with the players, right? Like, it's a highlight, the fact they get to go and play the card game with players, but it's tiring. And, you know, as we found out with the first one, if you stick a t-shirt on someone and hand them some cards and say, go engage with the players for 6 hours in a row, they
yeah, well, that's why last time we made it so that people have 2-hour shifts of wearing the t-shirts rather than do that. So we'll do that again. Plus, we've got more staff now, so we can actually have a similar number of monsters for you know, with half-time shifts. So that works out okay.
That's very cool. Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't want to be in that position again because it is overwhelming to be that swarmed by people in my position. But it was one of the highlights of the last ExileCons, is getting to talk to players who. The people who were like fighting me and you, as it were, because we had the highest t-shirts on, were people who had mastered the card game. They'd arrived with the goal of doing really well at the card game. And it helps that there were rumors that someone was offering $2,000 for the card game prize. Like, remember those Mirror of Calandra pins? You know, anyway. So the people that came up to fight the card game against me were people that were so passionate about it, they'd made it their identity. Like, there was this guy, lovely guy actually, he was at the Ultra VIP party, who had pre-arranged card game strategy to like buy the starter decks that came in the drag pack off people who didn't intend to play. He had some amount he was offering them, and I don't approve of the real money trading of cards to cheat at the event, but it did mean that he was able to, like, you know, get through the first couple of levels of the card game slightly faster and get to the monsters that weren't quite as swarmed as the other ones, and it was like a League launch.
Well, I can get you a t-shirt for the next ExileCon, Chris. You can at least go for some of the time, get some
Whatever you need me to do, Jonathan, just let me know. I'll be available. Yeah. When are you announcing the... I mean, obviously, you'll still be working on it, but when do you plan to announce the schedule of what's happening at ExileCon?
Oh, it'll be a little bit later. I mean, we already talked about broadly what's going to be there, but in terms of the exact schedule, it's a little bit later because we need to get all of the talks and everything from all that stuff written. And yeah, as I said, probably be a little bit after 050, I would say.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I had a question about the League design stuff we were just discussing. So... Obviously, like, you and I know how leagues used to work when we did dozens of them for PoE1. But these days, is the process of making a league for PoE2 different than the way that we made it for PoE1? Bearing in mind, like, how PoE2 leagues get integrated into the endgame? Like, are there any big differences there?
Not really, to be honest. It's pretty much the same stuff because at the end of the day, the formula that we worked out in terms of all the things you need to have in a league is still very much the case.
Yeah. Why the fuck would you change something that's...
I would say the main difference is that the level of narrative complexity is higher than what we previously had.
That's the biggest mistake Diablo ever made. The biggest mistake Blizzard ever made when it comes to Diablo 3 and Diablo 4 is they did not take Diablo 2 and then take the core parts of Diablo 2 that mattered to people, the things that was great about the game, the things that made us come back for 25 plus years. They didn't take those things, add them into the game, and then continue development on them to make more, and just that's the biggest like mistake they've ever made, right? Is trying to World of Warcraftify Diablo, basically. That's what happened, right? Because they saw how much money they were making off of selling all these dumbass skins in World of Warcraft, and they decided to go that route with Diablo instead of letting Diablo stay what it was, right? Like, they didn't take Diablo 2 and take the item system and take the rune system and take the idea of immunities and take the idea of all these other things that make the game great, right? Like the low drop rate of items and stuff like that. They just completely 180'd and took the perfect system and made it the exact thing that nobody wanted, basically, except for a small amount of people who are like very casual, right? And those people are not going to enjoy the game for that long. They're going to enjoy the game for some period of time, and then once it becomes the same thing over and over and there's no real development or evolution of the game or any of that shit, even the casual players are going to drop out and be like, yo, I've already done this fucking 10 times over. You're going to give me another set of powers that's the exact same thing as the last time. Now it's just called something else. And instead of being blue, now it's yellow. Like, the lack of creativity on Blizzard's side when it comes to making new content is just awful. it's so bad. Like I'm having such a hard time understanding how 250 people at GGG are able to outperform 20,000 people at Blizzard. I do not understand how the math is mathing out for that. Like, I do not understand how they can create better content, more content, and do it and give it to the players for free when they already paid for the game, like GGG is doing, because there's no way they can't do it. They can 100% do it if they really want to, but it's gonna take a lot of effort, and it's not gonna make them $1 trillion, right? Like, that's not how it works. It's gonna it's gonna grow the player base, which is in turn gonna give you more like money, right? Because they're gonna buy the skins and shit like that, even though it's not worth it. It's the fact that they're so unwilling to listen to the community. They're so unwilling to fucking do the work that's needed to make the game the exact thing that people really want, right? And I feel like GGG is the complete opposite. We complain about something about the league, and that shit changes the next league, right? Like the way GGG listens to the community, the way they narrow down the problems, fix them, and then bring back the mechanics that was broken or that didn't function or we weren't happy with in a way that makes us happy. That's the real gold mine, right? Because that's going to bring back a lot of players. It's going to continuously bring back players to play the game. They're going to add more players to it, because those players who keep coming back are going to keep talking about it. And the more people talk about it, and the more people say that this is one of the greatest games they've ever played, the more people are going to try it out, honestly. And I don't even think we've seen like the real peak of this game yet. I still think the real peak of the game is probably like a year or two down the line. That's going to be the real peak of the game, where we're going to see like a massive influx on players that came from other ARPGs, or even people who came from other types of games like Call of Duty or GTA for that matter, right? Like, I truly think a lot of those players would see a game like this and try it out when it's free, and then get absolutely sold on it immediately. But as Jonathan was saying before, they are seeing a fair amount of players leave for a couple of leagues and then come back, right? Like 2 or 3 leagues, and I have encountered that same thing with a lot of friends I've played with, that they just did not. The easiest thing to pick out here would be the Hunt update with the Amazon, right? That update, I feel like, is one of the ones that killed the league immediately, and a lot of people left, and they probably did not come back for Abyss, because they thought like, okay, this league was shit, and the next one is probably going to be shit too. I'm just going to wait like a league or two, and then they'll probably fix all the things that I didn't like. And then they come back like 2 or 3 leagues later, and there's just so much new stuff. Actually, this league, the Valley League, I had a buddy come back to play for the first time after 01. So this is his first time back after the game came out, right? Like, or the early access came out. And he said the amount of new stuff they have added is so wild. He was confused on like how all these things worked, because he was like, what the fuck is all this? I'm like, what happened? I'm impressed that there's so much new stuff. And yeah, I understand that, man, because if you skip 2 leagues, you come back, bro. There's just so much stuff has happened, even though it's only like been basically 8 months, right? Like, it's just incredible the amount of stuff that can get added. Like, it is just absolutely ridiculous. And for the people who are gonna basically not play this league and gonna come back for the 1-0, they're gonna get absolutely annihilated with the amount of content that has changed and what has happened. There's so much stuff that's changing right now in this update that I feel like if you're not playing this update, you're gonna like play 1.0. You're gonna play that at a severe disadvantage, right, compared to the people who have been playing this for a minute. That is just insane.
the quality of the events you need to do and that kind of thing.
You want to have like a storyline that runs through it because you've got those the progress indicators now, right?
Yes, but it's not just that. It's kind of like, you know, just the overall quality of what you're doing just needs to be high in order to match with the rest of the game. So you can't really half-ass it the way that like maybe we would have, you know, like some years back. There's just quite a lot going on there, and that narrative stuff actually takes some of the largest amount of time because it requires a lot of different departments that are all moving together to create that stuff, and there's a lot of just like timing things and all sorts of stuff around that make it really hard.
Yeah,
it's probably one of the hardest things about 050 is because there's effectively the narrative content of, you know, 5 leagues in one release. You know, like there's so many of those narrative events, it just takes a really long time to get all that stuff working, and as I said, just one of the hardest things for whatever reason to actually to actually make good.
Early leagues in Path of Exile 1, like Anarchy, right? You know, there's a Rogue Exile, that's the league, or Invasion, there's an extra monster that's hard to kill. They were quite simple, obviously, and it got more complicated as time went on. You know, budgets went up, quality standards went up, and so on. Do you think there'll be a situation later where these early PoE 2 leagues seem really primitive and simple compared to the monstrosities you'll be producing in 5 years from now?
Well, it kind of already happened with the 010 leagues, but for a somewhat different reason, right? Because they were all made together. So I mean, I'd say what effectively, like a lot of what 050 is bringing all of those ones up to the standard that we've now effectively got for what a PoE 2 league needs to be. You know, I don't necessarily foresee them getting like too much larger, because like on some level there's a limit to what you can actually do in like a 4-month time period. Yeah, like I think it should honestly be like relatively similar. And like, to be honest, like the PoE 1 has also got that sort of level of stuff going on with a lot of its leagues. You know, like, I mean, especially things like Settlers. So, you know, like, there's just a little bit of that coming on, just like the overall studio, like the kind of stuff, the kind of standards that we have as a studio are just higher now than they used to be too.
I wonder if you've got this process where you come up with a league idea, you make the simulator and you try the league idea out, which is a good opportunity. If you don't like it, you can fail at the simulator stage rather than once you've made the thing. Have you considered having like dedicated designers working on multiple leagues at a simulator level, where all they're doing is getting approved ideas that then get made sequentially later? So now it's time to do League A and you implement that, but League B and C and D are being prototyped and iterated on at a simulator level in the background?
Well, I guess I got a few concerns about that. So one of them is that not every league is the kind of league that should have a simulator. Like Abyss is an example of a league that's just like, it's not like, the mechanic isn't, I mean, there's balanced simulation in the sense of like, you know, you need to work out like, you know, what the right number of the holes is and like, you know, how, like stuff like that, right? Like there's things like that need to be done, but it's not like a simulator in the same way that Incursion would be.
Yeah, that one could be prototyped for fun testing.
I'd really say that only every other league is the kind of league that needs to do that, and that's probably a good thing because they attract different types of player bases. And the funny thing as well, by the way, is those sort of simulator type, heavy type leagues, a lot of them are actually less popular when they get first released, and then they sort of tend to be more beloved later.
Once they're understood.
Once they're understood, I've noticed.
Yeah.
What was I going to say?
You had another point about simulator leagues.
Right. But the other thing as well is that it's really actually hard to make a league before you in advance, because so much of what you make needs to be a response to what the community cares about right now anyway. So like you wouldn't really be able to say like I mean, obviously there's things like, you know, you're going to need some uniques, right? You know, you're going to need a pinnacle boss, you know, you're going to need stuff like that. But like in terms of what the mechanics are and like what the game feels like it's missing, it's sort of hard to know about that in advance. So it honestly makes it a little bit hard to really to do that stuff in advance. The other thing as well that I think that is a bugbear that I think some game companies have is that, so I mean, we put everything into our leagues. And what I mean by that is like, we don't come up with like, here's a plan for like the next, like, you know, years of content or whatever, and then like hold things back and kind of like, okay, here's when we're going to release this thing, whatever. It's like everything we come up with that's cool, we just do it immediately.
Yeah, which is the way to go, man.
Like there's always more ideas that you can have, like if you can go back to the well and do it again. So I think that actually some game companies have run into problems where they like plan out this content schedule and then that's what they stick to, and then it's like they end up not really adding enough and that kind of thing. Like part of the reason why our leagues feel full is because, like, you know, if we have an idea, we just want to do it immediately. And that does sort of lead to, you know, like a somewhat hectic schedule. But on the other hand, like, you don't get this feeling of like missingness. And we actually almost made this mistake for 050. It's a little bit complicated to explain because like we kind of changed the plotline in order to not have this happen. But like we were going to have a situation where the boss that we were going to have was going to be one of like, it's like, oh, but like you haven't actually fought the true boss yet, kind of thing, and it's actually a really crappy ending. And I'm like, I actually don't want to be in a state, even if interstitially, where like you haven't fought the boss that you know is coming in the future. You know, like it's actually really bad.
There's another large action RPG franchise that did that, I think.
Okay, I wasn't thinking of anyone in particular, but effectively, like I actually think it's really bad to leave people hanging on something like, you know, like you get them all prepared for something and then it doesn't happen. It's like really crappy. So as I said, we almost made that mistake in 050 and then we changed it. Like we had to change quite a lot of plotline stuff in order to make that better. Yeah, it's just, I think it's important that like you see the goal, you get to the goal. So like, don't do something where it's like, oh, here's the series of like 4 bosses, and then like you're gonna fight one of them in this expansion, and then you're gonna fight the second one in the next expansion, and that kind of stuff. Like you actually really want to, like, if you're gonna do it, then just do them all at once, or don't do them, like, or don't even talk about the others or something. You know, like it's okay to be like, here's one, and then like you don't know about the others at all, like they're not hinted at, they're not like a thing. But then later on, there's more. But like, don't really. I think it's just a really bad idea to make players feel like, oh, you know, like I have to play later. I haven't even finished the story. Obviously, you know, we're in early access. We haven't finished the story.
That's just going to make people wait until the full thing is out, right?
Unfortunate, but at least we're not doing it wherever we can, wherever we don't need to.
Yeah, your point about throwing everything into each release definitely resonates. I remember a number of years ago when we were still finding our cadence and so on, I had this pipe dream of getting a league ahead or getting half a league ahead, right? And we quickly ran into the issue that if you do that, you become out of touch with the, you know, Reddit will decide 2 weeks before a release what needs to be in that release. And if you don't have that, if you haven't been reading the tea leaves just right, you know, beforehand, then you feel off base and out of touch. So, and then the other thing I remember you talking to me in detail about at the time was that if we have extra content, releasing it in this expansion and just making more extra content later is probably the best thing to do. I'm always valuing the today player rather than making our lives have an easier time later on.
Yeah.
That's
I was
how
trying
you
to
do it.
overproduce it, I think.
That's how you keep playing
the
people
reality
coming
of what
back
we
for
did was the way
13
you
fucking
wanted, where
years.
we dumped everything in each expansion and they had more stuff as a result.
I mean, it's not like we can never produce things ahead, right? I mean, for example, like the acts that we're making, right? Obviously, a bunch of work has been done in the background to make that happen. But it's honestly not the way I like working. And it's like part of the reason why I think I find like working in early access stressful, because you've got multiple things on the go at the same time rather than being able to just throw everything into one thing. There's a certain clarity you get just like being able to work on one thing. And so I honestly like, I just find these long pipelines to be quite stressful.
That makes sense because then the whole team has the same focus.
So I had a question. So early on, when we were discussing starting Path of Exile 2, one of our motivations for it was that we felt that because Path of Exile 1 was dozens and dozens of releases in, it was harder to get new players, right? Like jumping on a train that's been going for 10 plus years is difficult for some people. You know, the game has a reputation for being complicated. And so Path of Exile 2 was an opportunity as an onboarding point. And so my question is about accessibility. And, you know, I don't mean dumbing the game down or anything, but I just mean in terms of making sure that it's not, you know, too complicated for new players. So you've got this tension where on one hand, you need to be a worthy sequel to Path of Exile. And that means for many people being more Path of Exile than Path of Exile is. But it's also a thing where if you are too, you know, opaque and complicated for new players, obviously they'll bounce off it. How have you found trying to manage that? And do you think you've been successful at it?
Well, I think that my opinion is probably a little bit different from a lot of people, which is that I think that Path of Exile 1 being such an old game is in itself the accessibility problem that it has. What I mean by that is that this isn't to say that Path of Exile 1 isn't complicated. It is. I just don't think that the complexity is necessarily the reason why new players don't play it. I think the main reason why new players don't play it when they're not going to play it is like, well, this is a game that, you know, came out a decade ago. You know, like they feel like they've kind of missed the train. And so I don't think PoE 2 is necessarily... I mean, like, PoE 2 does have things that make it more accessible, but I wouldn't say that those were necessarily done because we're appealing to a different audience. It's more because we just thought that they were better designs that are just better in general for everybody who plays them. And I think the main reason why someone is going to play PoE 2 over PoE 1 is literally just because it's newer. Like, that is like a big factor for a lot of people, right? Like, there's just people who are like, okay, well, I never played PoE 1, I'm not going to get into it now. It's like really old. It's just the way a lot of people will see things, right? But hey, PoE 2, it's a new getting on point. I can play it now. And like, I'm getting it on the ground floor and then I'm going to play it. And that's just going to make the audience bigger just from the purpose of just from that alone.
That makes so much sense.
So I'm not like I'm looking at them, and I'm not looking and saying I want to appeal to a bigger audience. I'm looking at this and being like, this is a sequel that will appeal to a bigger audience who never, like, you know, because many people know about Path of Exile now, and the only reason they're not playing PoE 1 is just because it's old. So literally, it's like even if we literally had appealed to exactly the same audience, I think we'd just have a bigger audience for that reason alone.
100%.
Good answer.
But yeah, as I said, I don't say
getting in on the ground floor of a game, getting to learn it from the bottom up, is always the preferred way to play a game, in my opinion. Is when you start out at basically the same level as everybody else. Well, this is obviously not going to be possible because you're going to have certain overlaps from PoE 1 that's going to let a person who have played the PoE 1 part of the franchise for a while have an advantage in certain aspects of PoE 2. But I still think that it's the best way to do it, right? Is to make a new game and then capture the audience at the get-go when you're still putting the building blocks in place and you're still coming up with new ideas and crafting and items and mechanics and bosses and all these things. So whenever a new player jumps in, he feels like he's pretty much at the same level as everybody else. Whereas when you jump in PoE 1, for me personally, that was such a monumental task to learn. It took me thousands of hours to get comfortable enough to where I could craft my own gear and do my own stuff and figure out how to get to the end game fast and be really efficient with my maps and stuff like that. It just took me so much time because there was so many aspects of the game, so many mechanics, so many things that go together, right? And once you don't, I learned something new every single league I play in PoE 1. I'm learning new stuff where I'm like, why did I not know this? This is such a fucking, this is such brilliant info and it's so needed to know that sometimes I get surprised that, oh shit, I didn't even know this shit. This is all new to me, right? It was absolutely amazing. I cannot believe how that it's so incredible that they've done this amount of stuff with PoE 2. And I really, not to sound like a dickhead, but I do prefer PoE 2 over PoE 1 in some aspect, just because I got to be a part of it when it started, and I've been a part of it from the get-go until now. It feels more, I feel more attached to it, right? Because it's I was there when it was a baby, and I get to see it grow into a fully grown man now. And with PoE 1, it was becoming friends with a dude who's 70 years old, right? And he's trying to put all this life experience onto you, and it's just a lot to take in, right? Whereas this was a lot less to take in, so it's easier to learn all the systems and all the mechanics and the craftings and the currencies and everything, man. It's just a way better way to go about it. I totally agree with them putting this out and then capturing a much bigger audience because it's the new thing.
That to say that I don't want to make things more accessible, because I mean it is good to make things better. It's just that I wouldn't be like I never want to be the person thinking I'm appealing to a different audience specifically, because I'm not. I'm just making the game better. And at the end of the day, the audience I'm appealing to really still is myself. Just whether I think things. So it's things like the way the thing I use this example all the time, right? The support gem system is just easier to deal with in PoE 2, but it's not like I wouldn't have done that in PoE 1, if I'd have thought of the way of that working back then, right? It's just that we just didn't for whatever reason.
It's kind of amazing how well PoE succeeded despite having this system where if you're a new player, you have this really complicated thing where if I take my boots off, I can't cast Fireball anymore. Why is that? And if I'm a high level player, if I take my armor off to put a better one on that I found, I have to spend a week getting the sockets and stuff perfect again, or however long they're probably a lot faster these days. I have my mind back in the pre-3.0 era.
Sure.
But you have to futz with sockets quite a bit in order to have it be equivalent. And it's one of those things where every player at every stage of the game has to understand I need to be considering sockets with my items, which is something that's cleaned up really tidily in Path of Exile 2. I've been quite pleased with the progress of watching early access so far from my vantage point. I've been seeing really cool things about the game, so I wanted to say thank you for doing a great job with it. I think that what PoE2 has grown into is far bigger than both games grew into far bigger than we imagined, but PoE2 has such a unique identity of itself. You know, it could have easily been PoE1 with better graphics and different sockets, but instead you've made something that feels like a very modern action RPG in a really good way.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're doing a good job. Well, thank you very much for having the chat with me today. It's been really interesting talking about this stuff, and I hope the viewers have found it fascinating as well.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Massive shout out to Chris and Jonathan for this one. Fuck me, this was a great interview. Holy shit. So much interesting info. So many interesting topics. That's why Chris is a great interviewer when it comes to stuff like this, because he has the inside knowledge of how development goes on, how to attack certain themes and aspects of the company itself, right? So you're getting the inside look when you're listening to him interview somebody who's a part of this type of company, right? And man, impressive. I'm gonna die on this hill, but I still think that PoE2 is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen created by a gaming company, and the fact that it's gonna be free is to this day blowing my mind. I'm shell shocked from the idea of it being free, because I cannot believe the amount of stuff you're getting, and you don't have to pay a single dime for it, right? Like, it's just unfreaking believable. And yeah, I hope to see you all in 05. I hope you all are looking forward to this specific update, and I hope to see some servers that are running smooth and some systems that aren't super bugged, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm okay with it being bugged as long as it gets fixed, and that's exactly what he was saying earlier, that they're going to take this time to polish everything, which is exactly what I dreamed of, right? Now it's just we're getting the tabs for our stash to put the things in that really matters. Some of the stuff that I've been screaming about since 01, basically, and now we just need to basically hear them say that we're getting a flask reroll currency of some kind, so we can reroll our bottles, and then I am pretty freaking satisfied. That is the last thing I feel like it's needed. So I'm really happy with this. Massive props to the work that has gone into this and the amount of stuff they've done. I cannot believe it. It's absolutely ridiculous and insane. So yeah, I hope you all liked the video. If you do, like, comment, subscribe, all that good jazz. I'll leave a link for the original video in the description, so you guys can check that out if you want to. And obviously show some love to Chris, because he is a absolute goat when it comes to making games, but also interviewing people. I really like to listen to him. I feel like he's one of the better ones. And yeah, shout out to you guys. Hope to see you in the new league, and I'll catch you all in the next one.